Hi, podcast listeners. Today's episode is a best of compilation pulled from the Fine Homebuilding Podcast archives. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Enjoy. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined by Associate Editor Matt Milham.
Hello.
Kylie Jacques.
Hello.
Design Editor. And Producer Jeff Rose.
Hello.
Please email us your questions at FHBpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. This is question comes from Corey and Megan in Roanoke. Hello, FHB team. I loved your podcast and truly believe you bring all kinds of helpful things to the table. My wife and I are about to start on a kitchen remodel for a house we moved into 6 months ago. We've worked with a general contractor and a designer to ensure our kitchen is truly a functional space, as we both like to cook, as do our kids. We're doing the full 9 yards, moving walls to optimize the space, relocating the sink and island, new cabinets and appliances. I'd like your input on the following. We have a triple bank of windows that we found were racked during the home inspection, so they're being replaced during this renovation. During this project, we plan to add a screen porch with a bar-type seating on the inside and outside of this window, so when the windows are open, there's a pass-through to the porch. Casement windows will cause issues when swung out, and looking for your opinions on either an accordion-type window that folds onto itself when open, or a window that looks like a traditional double-hung but swings up like the ones made by the fold-up window company. It appears that the fold-up version can be quite wide and can fold either in or out. Obviously looking for a window that's strong over time, easy to open and close, and energy efficient. Would love to hear your thoughts, or maybe you have other options we should consider. I'm going to let you guys dive into this first.
Well, my first thought was like a pocket window, like a pocket door.
So it slips into the wall?
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Does that exist?
It does exist.
No, it doesn't.
There's at least one company that makes these things.
I'm sure they're inexpensive.
I'm sure they don't cost that much. You're going to be paying in euro, I believe. I think it's an Italian company called ProTech. And I imagine there's got to be other people out there who make similar products. But to me, it seems like a great idea.
I think a good millwork company could make this for you, but I don't think it would be inexpensive.
No, it probably wouldn't be cheap. So
that's cool. So you have a pocket window, and maybe there's multiple sash that stack up in one end or the other, or one in each, or two.
Yeah, I think they have different designs, but the one that I've got here basically just slides out to either side, and
I think
disappears inside the wall.
And you?
I put this question to my stepsister and her husband, who have a few houses in southern Maine, and they've used the nano wall system, both the walls. And
can you tell folks what that is? I'm familiar, but I bet there's a lot of people who are not.
Right. So it's sort of like an accordion style sliding door. Here's an example. I know you're not supposed to look. So they've used the pass-through windows and have some feedback on it. They're really happy with it. They said that they feel like the price differential is not that much more than
Do you know what
quality.
They paid for the window version of this?
I didn't get into that.
But it's thousands, right?
It's very expensive, but as they pointed out, if you're going to use quality windows, it's not that much more, and you're getting this added attribute.
Oh, yeah. And especially if it's in your kitchen, you want it to be comfortable, right? You spend a lot of time there.
But you could also use like European-style tilt turns that open in, and then it's not going to open over your counter and cause a problem. As long as opening in over your sink or whatever isn't going to be an issue.
Well, so they're talking about a breakfast bar on the inside. So, yeah, that'll go. But, like, if you have plates and all your stuff on the table and then you decide you want to open the window, you're going to have to move all that stuff, right?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I don't know what exactly their setup is going to be, because this counter is going to be on the outside, right?
Both.
Both sides are going to have, that just seems...
Yeah, too many countertops.
Too many counters, yeah.
That's great.
Make them
Especially
real
if the
deep.
sink's right there,
I think
which
that'd
is
be a cool
common.
feature.
Yeah. They did say that they've done both ways. They've had their local contractor install them, and they've also had Nana's specialists install them, and they definitely recommend the latter.
So my understanding is Nana wants to do their own installations with their own people, because it is not an easy thing to make work correctly. It takes some specialized knowledge.
Yeah.
And they're very unforgiving with out of square conditions, which would have me concerned with the structural problems that this space had that led them to need to replace these to begin with. So in any case, you should see what's going on, why the windows were racked. If it's a structural concern, fix that before you put new windows in, I would say.
Yeah.
And apparently they float over from Germany and take a very long time to get here. So you might want to consider that in advance.
I didn't realize that was a German product. I thought that was California. Oh, interesting. So I have a suggestion. I didn't tell you guys this, but so yesterday was a pretty nice day. So I did what I sometimes do. I went to the Ferris Creamery for lunch, which is a handmade ice cream store on Route 302 on the way to Bethel, Connecticut.
I thought you said you were working from home.
This counts as work.
I was here yesterday, but I did go out. And I did get Caltrax ice cream, which is the very best. Anyway, they have sliding windows like every other ice cream store, right? Or stand. And those are way less expensive, right? And you could get a few of them. And I think that would be an ideal solution if you needed to save some dough.
You think they'd look sort of commercial, though?
No, I have sliding windows in my barn. Residential window manufacturers all just about have a sliding window. You can get super cheap vinyl ones, or you can get wood sash, nice windows too. But the problem with that is you only end up with half of the opening at open. If you want it completely wide open, that's not a solution.
I think that's the idea.
Yeah. Imagine I would come up with a cheap solution.
In terms of the energy efficiency, though, I did look on Green Building Advisor, and Martin Holliday stood corrected at one point because somebody was saying they're not at all any energy efficient, and he looked into it a little bit more, and he said they're much more energy efficient than I thought.
I've been led to believe too that the folding window walls are energy inefficient too, and I know they have higher amounts of air leakage than other types of windows.
Sure,
but
they're not as bad as apparently people claim.
I was on an install for one of those, and they're beautiful product, and it sure makes a nice space. Like if you're talking about seamless transitions between inside and outside, that's the way to do it.
Yeah. That's for the doors anyway, right?
You're talking about,
yeah.
I saw a combination of the doors and the window that they're talking about. It's pretty sweet.
They can fold or they can stack. Like you can have them both ways, and they can be biparting, which means they open in the center, or they can move from one end to the other. It's pretty cool stuff, and you can have them electrically controlled now, as I understand it, which would be even more jaw-dropping to show your friends. Which is the whole reason to do this anyway, right?
Yeah, just show off how much money you have. It's got remote-controlled doors.
Oh, I think we should open up the doors, don't you,
Siri,
honey?
open my doors.
Oh, right? That's a whole new level of complexity.
Oh no, bats! Siri, close the doors.
And we have a question from Cincinnati, Ohio. Mark writes, "Hello, guys. Your podcast is the best. I never miss it." Well, thank you, Mark. In podcast 175, you discussed helical foundations versus concrete. You did not mention pin foundations that have been in use for many years in the upper Midwest, particularly Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. They appear to be affordable, fast, and require little digging. Most importantly, they're supposedly more resistant to frost heave. I plan to use them on a deck I'm going to rebuild later this year. Could you address the pros and cons of these? You want to start?
Sure.
Go for it.
Minimal site impact. I know that
Should we start by describing what this thing is to
that's a good idea.
Folks?
Yeah, go ahead.
You want me to?
Yes, please. Products are your
So like imagine a big concrete block with holes drilled in it at angles that spread as they go down, and then you drive these what look like 2.5-inch pipes through the holes with a rotary hammer or a jackhammer into the soil. And
at
so
an angle.
At an angle. And these like ends up with these steel pipes.
Legs.
Yeah,
legs. Yeah, very
pins. Good. Yeah.
And that holds the concrete in place and supposedly goes to frost depth to prevent heaving and stuff. I've never used these. I've seen them in ads and stuff, but go ahead. What do you pointed out that you don't have to dig.
Right. And There's an architect that used one, especially if you have trees that you want to protect. I don't know that he does, but it's something to consider. There was a historic tree that there were a lot of restraints around it, and his solution when he was putting an addition, there's actually a photograph of it. Can you throw that up there, Jeff?
Yeah, so I don't know if I described this adequately, but
I think you did a good job. It's really simple.
It seems great, right? I just don't know if it would work in New England, like, because one of the steel pipes hits a rock or ledge, you're done.
Yeah,
it's
but if
not
you have sandy soils.
Yeah, and I don't know what the geology is of the upper Midwest, but I think it's all clay and gravel and sand. It's all glacial deposition is my guess.
Yeah.
But that can include big rocks depending on where you're at.
Yeah. Just move it a couple feet to the right.
Sure. And oftentimes for decks and stuff, that's a totally viable solution because you have girders, beams that you can put the footings within certain, parameters.
Yeah.
I don't think you need
some flexibility.
Yeah. And I think you don't need excavation and fill permit.
Right. I have one problem with them. I think they're kind of ugly. I think
you don't see much of them.
Well, you see the concrete top.
I think they look kind of high tech.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You don't have to see that. I mean,
so what would you do to hide it?
Plant something around the deck.
That would be what my wife Carol would say. Is like that's a landscaping solution. Is you put something in front of it so you don't have to look at it.
I mean, I would say it's more attractive than a standard deck footing in a sonotube.
I think you're totally off base
because it's got the same base on top of it, and the rest of it looks like beautiful cast concrete in like a.
I think it's kind of funny looking.
Yeah, but it looks pretty good. Like it looks like it was done by a pro.
It's pretty low maintenance. Once you get it in there, it's probably not going anywhere on the pressure treated wood, footings.
I don't know did either of you figure out what these cost?
No, I saw them actually at JLC Live probably 3 years ago or something.
Yeah, I remember seeing them there too.
Yeah, and it seemed like a great idea then.
Did you ask him about the problems with rocks under the ground that the pipes might hit?
I probably did at the time, and the reason they were so attracted to me then was because
you were digging holes.
Dug something like 27 footing holes by hand, and that took up the better part of a semester. I mean, we didn't even finish the deck because we spent so much time digging holes.
That seems like a valuable educational experience.
Yeah. Don't be the guy with the shovel is the lesson there.
So I think these things are also built for disassembly.
What do you mean?
They're easily taken apart.
So if you have a temporary structure, this is a good solution. Okay. I know that people like them in wet soils because there's no excavating in muck. Mm-hmm. But then you need some equipment to dry them so they're not entirely off-grid kind of installation.
Yeah. Do these things like those? Do they have a way of telling whether or not your bearing is good enough? Because I imagine you can just keep connecting lengths of post or whatever to this thing and drive it farther and farther.
That was one of the questions I had, and like I said, I have no experience with this. But
you mean extending the length of the pipe, adding to it?
Yeah.
Oh, and his question is can you verify the bearing capacity of this thing? Based on how difficult it is to drive the rods, or how easy do they go in, or do they have a huge bearing capacity that's not an issue once all the pipes are driven?
Yeah.
The pins.
Yeah.
I don't know. So
I found a couple of useful websites that
we'll
be
put
in
those
the
on the
notes.
podcast webpage, and you can look that up. I'd love to know more about this. If any of listeners have used this with success or not success.
The architect that used it in Austin for that reason, to preserve that tree, he had built a U-shaped addition. Well, he added an addition that made the house U-shaped, and the tree sits right in the middle of that space courtyard. He was thrilled that worked out the way it did because, he had an 11-foot drip zone that he had to stay away from, and because he was able to drive those stakes in at angles like that.
To avoid the roots.
He said it was a handy solution that way.
That's a great idea. I've heard of people building boardwalks and stuff through wetlands with them because of the environmental concerns, and you can't excavate.
Right. I think that's their primary application.
I've always been a big fan of helical pilings, as folks have heard me talk about. for several reasons. There's minimal site disturbance. You get verifiable bearing capacities, and you can weld virtually anything on the top of them for holding beams or posts or whatever, mailboxes, signs. I think this doesn't have quite that flexibility, but I could see you could adapt the top of it to hold all kinds of stuff.
Did you get the impression that he's going to do this himself?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, the equipment you need for this is much more accessible.
Totally. That is one drawback of the helical pilings is you need somebody with the equipment to put them in for you. Whereas this, if you can rent an electric jackhammer, you can buy the adapter that goes on the end of it to match the shape of the pin, and you could do this yourself in a weekend, presumably, which is pretty darn cool.
A lot faster than digging a hole.
Yeah, and more satisfying, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, so we got some great feedback on episode 180.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people care about cars or trucks,
Yeah, let's get to that in a little bit. I want to first start off with Brent from Canada A. He wrote us about keeping the cost down in a kitchen remodel, and I thought it was so good, I'm going to do the whole thing.
And Brent, if you're listening, we want you to write a story.
Yeah, I think this is feature-worthy, for sure.
Absolutely.
Hi, FHB team. First off, thanks for the great content on the podcast and magazine. I've learned so much from listening and reading. I thought I would drop you a quick note about two of the items you talked about in podcast 180. On keeping the cost down in a kitchen remodel, I have a bit of experience with this as I've hacked my way through 2 apartment kitchen remodels as shown in the photos. I only have before pictures for the second one. The first one was so bad when we moved in, the dishwasher caught fire when the inspector turned it on. They both cost around $15K in Canadian pesos, so that's about $11,000 US. $11,000 kitchen remodel. That's pretty impressive.
And they're beautiful. You
Yeah.
did a stellar job.
Yeah, they're good
He
looking
says
for sure.
$450 American, but that's not true.
He was making a joke. I just
Right.
thought it would confuse people, but
Yeah.
that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I'm an engineer by trade, so I really overanalyzed the costs, and I think I learned some takeaways to save dollars on kitchen renos. All right, so his first recommendation is plan, plan, plan. It sounds geeky, but keep track of costs of your different options with a spreadsheet. Scrutinize the big ticket items first and work through to the less expensive things.
So along those lines, we just recently did a story about flipping houses. And if you're thinking about resale value, the cosmetic things that you think might add to the value that people might
Countertops.
like. Yeah. Well, specifically, they mentioned things like a drop zone in the kitchen or
What's a drop zone?
where you can put your bags and whatnot. Like you come in and you.
Oh, that's like for your keys and phone and stuff.
Yeah, like a sort of shorthand mudroom.
Okay.
Drop zone.
Cool. I didn't know that.
Or built-in, or additional higher finishes, higher quality finishes and whatnot that eat away at the budget easily, and that they don't really add to the resale value. So if you're thinking about that, then you might want to just stick to the budget. Is the point?
Yeah, if it's not considered in the comps,
Right.
then it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting because
Yeah,
I think
totally.
a lot of people think along those lines.
I think I agree largely, but if you have cool details, I think that helps sell houses.
It may help sell it, but
Yeah.
it's not going to get you more money.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
that was the point.
I think I agree too with that. Brent also says, plan for standard size appliances. You won't be able to find as many deals if you need a 27-inch refrigerator. Also a very good suggestion.
Yeah.
And I would suggest, too, that consider the floor model.
Yeah, me too.
I
Scratch
wanted
and
a
dents and that kind of stuff. Yeah, seriously.
character, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I bought. I was looking for a 14.5 cubic foot fridge, and it turned out to be significantly more expensive than a standard size refrigerator, which I was...
Because it's oddball? Because it should
it's-
cost less.
Right? Less material used. It wasn't the case. So that's why I went with the floor model.
Interesting. Stick with a range. Going for a slide-in range with downdraft or separate cooktop and in-wall oven will add thousands. Yes,
Yeah.
it will.
Not just because of the appliance cost, but venting those things. Like venting a downdraft, where are you going to put that? You got to think about that.
It's a big pipe.
Yeah.
What is it, 8-inch duct probably?
Yeah, probably
Yeah.
8, 10, I don't know.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, Jeff knows.
Jeff, is it 8?
Yeah. Yeah. I
How
have
did you
one.
vent yours?
It goes down in the basement and out the wall.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it's a pain.
Number 4, keep things out of the island. Resist the temptation to put the sink or range in the island. The ventilation, electrical, and plumbing costs will explode. I love this guy. Put it on wheels if the electrical inspector tells you to put an outlet in it.
Great tip.
Yeah, that is a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if it moves, then you don't need a receptacle.
I'm a big fan of the freestanding island. Jeff, do you have that picture of my kitchen island in there? Did you guys forget all my pictures?
I don't know.
Did you put it in there?
I did put it in there.
I saw it in the folder.
Yeah.
We'll look at that. We'll put that up there later, I promise.
Yeah.
See, Patrick puts this PowerPoint together, so.
Yeah, I've noticed my pictures get left out of it.
You didn't have it yesterday.
I did.
Oh my God! Well,
Way in
I
advance.
don't know.
But
Tell
anyway,
me.
the point is that it was $1,300, and at the time I thought it was a big expense, but comparatively, it's really not. And I get to bring it with me wherever I move. And if I move into a house with an island already, I can use it for something else.
And where did it come from?
It was either Restoration Hardware or Crate and Barrel. I can't remember.
And you're happy with it so far?
It's fantastic, and I really wish we could look at it right now.
It's just turning that knife.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, countertops. If you like wood, go for it. You can replace the wood countertop. You can replace the wood countertops in my second renovation 8 times before you hit the cost of the quartz ones in my first renovation. The wood holds up pretty well, and it gets character over time.
The carpenter that I bought my house from put in maple countertops, and I will say that they're gorgeous. They do hold up. There's one thing I've noticed is where I put my dish rack can build up mold there.
Yeah.
Gotta be careful with moisture.
Yeah, same in the schoolhouse that I rented previously. Had the same thing.
Yeah.
And I just sanded the heck out of it.
Yeah. It's like the one area where I have to kind of keep up on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have a drain board under there?
Well, that's part of the problem. I do not.
Well, there's your problem.
But still, that would be moisture. I mean, it's just,
Yeah, wood and sinks are, not the best combination, but... Sink. If you can find a cheaper farmhouse sink that goes the full depth of the counter, like the one in the second photo, you can save a few $100 on countertops, and the installation is super easy. So his sink in this one kitchen goes from the very front of the countertop all the way to the backsplash, which saves that weird little U-shaped cutout in the countertop.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to handle those sections of countertop as well.
And without breaking it.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. 7, cabinets. If you're going budget, you can't beat IKEA. The next cheapest option is a minimum 50% more. The hardware is great, and the carcasses are fine and have a warranty. If you want to go bougie, did I say that right?
Bougie.
What does that mean?
Bourgeois.
Bourgeois.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay. Say it again.
Bougie.
Bougie. That makes
We're going to
me
put
laugh.
this
I like
on
the way
a
you say that,
YouTube
Matt.
thing. Yeah.
Can you say that one more time?
No.
If you want to go bougie, you could order custom fronts for them. Also, keep the number of drawers to a minimum and consider open shelving. That is a really good point. Drawer bases are so much more expensive than normal cabinets, but they are also nice.
Didn't those folks in the best small or best new house that you wrote about?
Yeah,
Do
they
that?
did IKEA.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you can buy like aftermarket doors.
That's
and
what
stuff
he's
for that.
talking about,
if
the
you wanna
custom
change.
fronts,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, there's so many sellers of those, and they make some really cool stuff.
I think they're freaking really crappy, though.
The boxes.
Yeah.
They do seem to fall apart.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they're any worse than what you're going to find in the home center. At least as long as you're looking at, like a particle board type box.
So my friend Mark, if you're listening, but he did a IKEA kitchen, and they're not living in that house anymore. But I'd like to ask him what his experience was living it for, I think, 3 or 4 years. So Mark,
I've
if you're
seen some
listening,
pretty high-end looking IKEA kitchens.
yeah, they look great.
Yeah.
And these kitchens look nice too. I just don't think they're built that swell. Okay, so finishes. Pay attention to the cost of tile. You don't use much, but the difference between the high and low end can be as much as 10 times, and you can make the cheaper stuff look good if you're creative. Number 9, contractors. Have a crazy detailed plan ready for them before they arrive. Hang around when they are doing the work and have them charge you time and materials. I don't know. If I were a contractor and they were hanging around watching me, it would get way more expensive. We planned the route for wires, plumbing, marked out exact locations for fixtures, opened up walls ahead of time, had the key to the electrical room. All the fixtures were on site. etc. If you're paying $100 per hour, you want the person to be spending the time doing what they are trained for, not discussing if you want an outlet at 18 inches or 24. Wow, that is good advice.
We actually have a story on that. I don't know if it was Andy Engel. I don't know who wrote it because there's no byline, but it's about working with a building contractor, and he says all these things and other things as well. And it's a good little story.
We should put that in the podcast page. Yeah. Number 10. Do as much work as you can on your own. Duh. That's what he says.
I would also consider upcycling some items.
So from the Habitat Restore, for example, buy used stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm in the market for a clawfoot tub, and that's the route I'm going to go.
Hear that, everybody? Got a clawfoot tub. Kylie's looking for one.
UPS treasures will kill you, though.
Oh, true.
I had a clawfoot tub delivered to our house in Stowe. And...
was it new?
Yeah, it was from a place in California, I think, that went out of business. It came in a wooden crate, and the freight company delivered it to my porch. They backed up to the porch, which was about 5 feet off the ground. I took a section of railing out, and they slid it onto the porch. And then I hired a moving company to carry it up the steps, and boy, am I glad I did that.
Mm. Did you have to take some framing down to get it through the door?
Mm-mm. No, they slid it through the door on a mover's dolly, and then they put it on an appliance dolly to take it up the stairs, which had a 90-degree turn on the at the landing. And they had to stand it on end. Oh, my God. It's horrible. I felt so bad for those guys, but it would have been worse if I had been doing it. Okay, so Brent from Canada also had some thoughts on work trucks. If you may recall Henrik's letter regarding work trucks.
Never forget it.
His letter generated more listener feedback than any other subject we've ever talked about on the podcast. So, Henrik, if you have any other things that are stuck in your craw and want to pick on us about, I would say let us know, because it seems to work. Brent says, while I'm not a pro doing this work all day, I do agree that most contractors and even worse DIYers are way over-trucked. So I'm hoping that over-trucks becomes part of our lexicon, much like greedy dormer. So over-trucked is a good way to describe it. I agree wholeheartedly with Matt that people have to take responsibility and be more aware of their actual needs and the overconsumption associated with driving a truck just because, or taking 15 extra trips to the Home Depot because of poor planning. We could have easily justified buying a truck doing 3 major renovations in 5 years, but stuck with our trusty Honda Civic and made it work. A game changer for us was a car-sharing service, Moto, which has trucks and cargo vans parked around big cities for reasonable prices, and it's way more convenient than renting. I didn't know about this company. Did you?
No.
Did you ever hear about?
No.
Jeff?
No.
But I've heard of renting cars.
Sure. Sometimes you're really helpful. Where was I here? Every time I go to Home Depot, there are at least 3 or 4 full-size trucks picking up two or three pieces of lumber that I could fit in a Honda Civic, no problem. See the attached photo. And did you guys see this photo?
Yeah.
I love this guy.
It's great. It looks like me moving
So
out of
those
my
of you
dorm at
listening,
college.
he's got like, I don't know, a dozen 2x4s and like 10 sheets of drywall in the trunk of his Civic.
He is an engineer, so he figured it out.
Yeah.
I wanted to point out that a Civic has an 850-pound total payload capacity. So if you're going to do this, just use your head.
Yeah.
And I don't think it accounts for cantilevering drywall out the trunk, the 850-pound payload.
Not. Yeah. You got to send your skinniest guy.
I once put 16-foot 2x4s on top of my Honda or Chevy Cobalt.
How did that work out?
I wouldn't tell anyone to do that. Yeah. It was dangerous.
16-foot AZAC is fun, too.
Oh, that's even flexier. Jeez. Well, Brent, thank you for all your thoughts. And Kylie's going to be in touch on a feature article regarding your design tips for a DIY kitchen remodel.
Truth.
So Aaron from Pittsburgh writes, greetings, podcast team. Huge fan of the show. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Aaron. I recently got together with some friends from Washington, D.C., and the real estate market there is crazy. I've heard the same.
Yeah.
Many houses are on the market for less than a week, and if you want to buy, you often have to come mortgage pre-approved, offer over the asking price, and forgo having your own inspection. Most houses have pre-purchase inspections done, so you get to see the report, but not necessarily hire your own inspector. My question, with such short evaluation windows, what advice would you give people that are buying their first house in this market? To ask another way, are there red flags or obvious things to look for that can hint at the build quality of a house? Best regards from the Steel City. So,
it's a great question.
It is a great question. So what did you look for when you're the most recent home purchaser on the podcast team here? What did you look for?
Well, I didn't know what to look for, quite frankly. That's why I think this is a good question.
Yep.
And so I'd like to go through what you pointed out here.
Well, no, let's hold off on that because he wrote this.
Oh, he wrote this?
Yes. So,
I didn't catch that.
So let's talk about what we would say, and then we're going to give his list.
All right.
He was helping us out.
Yeah, this is a great. I thought this came from. I thought this was an article that was something that you shared.
Well, it's
like a Fine Homebuilding article,
gonna be.
Which it should be.
Yeah, it's going to be.
Okay, all right. That's even cooler.
Well, my first thing is basically his first thing on this list, and I still, I bought my house.
Should we just read his list?
Yeah,
we can.
I think so.
Yeah.
I was just going to say the first thing I do is want to see the basement, which drives the real estate agents totally crazy. They're like, you really want to see that? And I'm like, yeah, because that's where the expensive stuff is.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah,
everything else is easy to fix.
And also, I mean, if you can see evidence of water damage down there if it exists.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a non-starter. No, I'm not going to buy this house because it's full of water in the basement, right?
Right. I don't care how much I love the bathroom if this thing is packed with mold.
Yeah, so
I think I was most concerned with the roof, and that's just because that's what I was told to be looking at when I went, because I went by myself, and I didn't know what to look for, but
Did one of us tell you that?
I didn't know you guys yet, so.
So Aaron gave us his 10 tips. He claims to be a savvy real estate guy, and based on what he's written here, I would totally agree. So he says, check to see when the house sold last. This can point to a flip, which isn't always bad, but flips tend to use lower quality materials that might not stand up over time. And if you've ever seen any of those shows, you can tell what's going on behind the wall is not always up to snuff on the flipping scenario.
Yeah.
And how does one find out when a house was last sold? I guess you go to the town office, right?
You can do that. A lot of times I get real estate listings every day from Zillow.
Yes.
Because I've just never turned the alert off after I bought my house. And I check them out almost every day. And the same houses will come up about every 5-6 months, it seems like.
Yeah,
I'll see a
they're
house
off
and
the
then I'll see it
market,
again.
and then they're back on. They're like, oh, this is just on the market. But you're like, I've seen this house a year ago.
Yeah, and it's like double what it was the last time. And I'm like, oh, let's see what they did. And it's always like, I'm like, I do not understand why they decide to do some of the things they do. Like, they won't rearrange the footprint, but they'll redo the kitchen, and they have like this awful tile in there. And I'm like, why did you waste all the money on that? Like, you're probably not going to recoup that because nobody's going to pay for that garbage.
No, and flippers, like, their only way to make money is on the sale price, right? So they have their singular motivation is to keep the repairs to the absolute minimum, right? It's
make it look good.
It's got to be as cheap as possible for them to make money.
Try to get it out of your hands before you have to make your first payment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron says you can get a decent idea if a wall is load-bearing or not by going into the basement or attic. If you have grand plans for an open floor plan remodel, this info could be critical.
Such a good point.
Yeah. In the same vein, while you're in the basement, look for the main drain stack. Moving the drain stack is rarely easy and often impossible. Also true. Look at the mechanicals. How old is the hot water tank, furnace, etc.? Are they direct vent or did they run through a chimney? Is it forced air or hot water heat? If it's forced air, does it have AC? If it's hot water, what'll it take to add AC later? All good questions, especially if you're going to live in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Yeah.
How old is the roof? See if this is disclosed in any of the paperwork. That was what you said, Kylie.
Yeah. I was able to determine how old it was.
Moss growing on it old.
Do you see signs of previous damage or repair, interior or exterior? Can you look in the attic? Any obvious water damage? What about added insulation? Are the windows and doors original, and what's the quality? Older vinyl windows or hollow core doors might point to overall lower house quality. Also agreed. Do the windows function? Are they painted shut, missing hardware, or do they slam closed when you try to leave them open?
I did test for that.
I think every one of the windows in the house I grew up either was painted shut or was held open with a broom, still length of broom handle. That was just normal. Like,
yeah.
People wonder why I tolerate some stuff, and I think that's like, well, because I didn't have windows that worked growing up. It's like, it's fine, a stick. This might be frowned upon, but I'm not shy about pulling up a corner of carpet to see if there are hardwoods underneath. He says, try a closet first.
Is he going there with like a utility knife and just starts cutting away?
I hope
what are you
so.
doing?
That's hilarious. He calls them bulkheads. I've called them soffits. These are the things over kitchen cabinets that take up the space between the tops of the cabinets and the ceiling. And he says bulkheads in kitchens may have ductwork or other utility lines in them. Don't always assume you can remove them to install taller upper cabinets. And his last piece of advice is bring a flashlight, which whenever I've had friends have me look at their prospective real estate purchases, I always have a flashlight, and I always take a scratch awl because I want to poke around the mud sill and the ends of the joists to see if they're rotted.
Yeah.
You can't do that in much of the house, but that's all exposed.
Yeah. I mean, just in general, I would say, I do not like the home buying process in the U.S., and what I'm guessing is most of the U.S. I mean, for my own house, I know it was just frustrating the amount of time that you get to spend in the house looking at it with the realtor. Like, you can't really get into everything that you want to get into, and maybe other places are different. I don't know.
Because the real estate agent wants you to hurry along, or I've never felt that they were rushing me.
It's not even that. Like, if I'm buying a car, I get to test drive it. If I'm buying a house, I don't get to spend a week in it. I don't get to look at the utility bills and see how much it's going to cost me. I get all that with a car.
Sure.
But there's no regulation saying that anybody has to provide any of that information when you're buying a house. So
Isn't Massachusetts considering that?
I don't know.
I think so.
But it's like the biggest purchase you're ever going to make in your life, and you know less about it than you do about literally like a pencil that you would buy on Amazon. And that to me just like is so irritating. And even like in New York, I think in order to get your own inspector in there, you have to be under contract.
Yes.
And then in order, like in most cases, I think most sellers probably do this, they don't have to disclose any of the known defects to you. All they have to do is give you a $500 basically deduction on the amount that you're paying for the house. And then basically all of their knowledge of everything that's wrong with the house just is like goes into a black hole somewhere, and you get to figure it out yourself. But you got $500.
That's New York specific?
Yeah, and I don't know if other states are similar or if they have similar rules. But it's to me it's a joke.
I don't think you have to disclose anything unless someone asks, right?
But even if they ask, I don't think they're under no obligation. At least
we need to get a real estate attorney on the show and just ask them questions, because
get a subpoena.
I always volunteer energy bills as part of. Well, I've had to do this once.
That's a good idea.
Selling point. A selling point, exactly.
Yeah.
Look, this is legit. These are my propane bills, these electric bills. This is cheap to run.
So maybe that's a hint.
Yeah.
So if the seller is not willing to provide that stuff to you, maybe that is a red flag.
Sure.
Yeah.
I love the idea of looking for atmospherically vented combustion appliances, either oil or gas, that go into a masonry or steel chimney. That's inevitably going to be a problem if you're going to stay in the house for any period of time. I can guarantee it.
Sort of unrelated, but one of the things that you do during that time frame when the house is being inspected is to get your air quality and radon testing, water quality testing done. Is that something that would not allow time for that? I was concerned about that. I wanted to know.
Usually it does as part of the process after you're already under contract.
Yeah.
At least that's been my experience.
Before closing, that stuff has to be resolved.
Okay.
And I know Connecticut and Vermont both required us to have our water tested before closing on the real estate deal.
Yeah.
And Vermont required a radon test, but I don't remember Connecticut requiring that.
Yeah, we requested one, I know, in New York, and it was not part of the inspection process on its own. We had to pay extra for that. So
it was such a whirlwind when I did it. I can't remember the order of things. I just remember when my housing inspector was there, I was also doing that. So
Yeah.
My soapbox about real estate transactions are the relationships between home inspectors and agents, which everyone says it's on the up and up, but
I wondered about that too.
I can't imagine it's on the up and up. I mean, they both have an interest in seeing each other get this deal done. Right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be the home inspector who kills a deal, and you need referrals from real estate agents to stay in business. Like, it just seems like a very shady relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
and a lot of them have been working together for years. I mean, it's like they've got each other's backs, right?
I think
they're feeding each other.
Of course, the agent is going to recommend the person who's not going to be a problem,
exactly.
right? It's like,
yeah.
This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined by Justin Fink, Editorial Director.
Hey, guys.
Deputy Editor Matt Milham.
Hey.
That's a new role for you, right?
Yeah. A few days old.
Since when?
Since Tuesday.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
It means more
Still
work and
figuring
the
it
same
out.
pay.
Slightly better pay.
All right.
But definitely more work.
Definitely more work.
Yeah.
Better you than me. And producer Jeff Rose.
Hey.
And we heard from Alan from Western Kentucky regarding episode 183. He wrote in to discuss painting brick, you may recall, and he mentioned a product made by Roma Bio, which is mineral-based, and none of us had any familiarity with this.
I would have said Romabio. I'm glad you read it, not me.
So this, I wouldn't have known how to say it either, except I talked to someone who's more familiar with it than me.
Good.
So Travis Allen, who's an estimator with our favorite painter, Hansel Painting in Durham, New Hampshire, explained to me that there are 3.5 ways to actually color brick, and they do all of them virtually.
3.5.
Yeah. So the first way is to use one of these Roma Bio products, which is semi-transparent, and it's a single coat process. And people like it because it kind of has this kind of Mediterranean rustic look. Like you can put the coating on thin in some areas and thick in others, and it kind of gives it this aged appearance. And the photos on the Roma Bio website look fantastic. And that is the least expensive way because it is a one-coat process. And the manufacturer and Travis was unwilling to corroborate this, but he says the manufacturer says that this coating is very much like the coatings they've been using for centuries in parts of Europe. And it's very long-lasting because it's mineral-based. It sticks really well to brick, and it's also vapor-permeable.
What do you mean he wasn't going to corroborate it, though? He disagrees?
Because it hasn't been in the marketplace long enough. So I asked him what the longest these projects have been around. The oldest ones he could think of were just several years old.
Okay.
So, and he says they're holding up okay, but several years in the realm of painting is not a long time.
And that stuff, what do you think it is? Just lime wash?
So it's hard to tell from the product data sheets. I tried to figure it out. I don't think it's lime, but I think it's lime-like. Lime has got some toxic qualities, right? It's not. It's corrosive, right?
Well, yeah. It's what is it? Basic, I believe.
Yeah, it's
so yeah,
alkaline.
I mean, it's alkaline. So I mean, if you had it on your hands for a long period of time, it might be bad. But
When we're already using it in mortar and concrete.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but you can get chemical burns from those things. So
yeah, but it also depends on the kind of lime. So
Yeah,
like
sure.
if it's not slaked lime, you could get a burn much more easily than if you're using like hydrated lime, which is what most people are using, I think, for lime washes. I mean, I've had it on my hands for hours and hours, and
Yeah.
it didn't do anything to me.
Do you have it on your hands right now?
I might. I don't know.
your skin looks
I
kind
mean,
of flaky.
it definitely dried my hands out. I
Yeah.
would say it did that, but it didn't like burn through the skin or anything.
I don't know what to say because, like I said, it hasn't been in the marketplace long enough, and I haven't used it. But
It's a good bet that you should just be wearing a respirator and gloves for everything that we do now.
Yeah.
yeah, because of the particles at a minimum, right?
You never know. In 10 years, they're going to say like, oh yeah, that causes cancer. So
Yeah.
do it.
Right, the gloves cause cancer. That's what we're going to be in for next.
Right. Yeah.
Travis says the other second method is to use like 2 coatings of this product, which makes a completely opaque finish. So it's a matte, uniform finish. Whites and grays are pretty popular, and he sees increasing the number of these. And the other thing he says, this company has been very successful using social media, so the people who contact him already have some knowledge of these products and are seeking them out because they're one of the they refer people to Hansel Painting.
Oh, okay.
So they can put 2 coats of that on. The third way is to use primer. Loxon is the product they use from Sherwin-Williams, and then 2 coats of acrylic paint. And if you want a gloss finish, he says that's the only way to get it. A lot of people want washability on their exteriors, and he says, so they say immediately I want a high gloss or a semi-gloss finish so we can wash it, until they learn that it costs 3 times as much because you're doing 3 coats instead of 1 coat. And the labor goes way up because of the painting.
3 coats for it to be
A coat of primer and 2 coats of paint.
Oh. I thought you meant 3 coats of paint if you're switching to semi-gloss.
No.
Got it.
So Most people want that until they figure out what it costs, and then they're fine with the matte finish.
Yeah. Nobody washes anything anyway.
Yeah.
So he was, and then the halfway.
Yeah, I was really waiting for the half.
Yeah. So I believe it's a one-coat product made by Sherwin-Williams that you put on super thick, like the thickness of truck bed liner, right? And that's kind of a matte finish too. Cool. But they've never used that, and he wasn't sure how that worked. So this came up because we're going to go down there to document this. And there's a lot to know. I had a 20-minute conversation with this guy. And
how are you going to show 3.5 different methods? Some customer's going to have a mismatched house after we're done.
So I thought, and we haven't talked about this editorially, but we would talk about the decision tree in deciding on these products and then feature one of them and acknowledge that this isn't the only way, that there are other ways.
We could also get some other photos of projects, I'm sure, that have been done one way or the other.
At least finished photos so people can figure out what it looks like.
Yes, sir.
So I was delighted to talk to him, and I learned a whole mess of stuff about painting brick. It's a very common thing there because there's lots of brick construction in North Carolina, and there's some ugly brick.
It's an awesome topic. We touched it just a little bit for a chimney question one time, not so long back, but we have not done a whole house as far as I know. So that's really interesting to me.
The one plus of the thick coat of Sherwin-Williams product, and forgive me, I don't remember what it's called, but I'll put it up on the podcast page so we can look at that later, is that it's a waterproofing. So if you're having vapor issues, it allegedly completely seals the brick from water, which is a big problem on parapets and stuff like that with water intrusion on masonry buildings.
Unless the water's coming from the backside, and then it'll just blow that coating right off. But I guess,
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Matt, Justin, and Jeff for joining me. Thanks to all of you for listening. Remember to send us your questions to FHBpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. We had some great comments recently. Thank you all for that. And those of you who are listening and haven't done that, I'm going to guilt you into it, hopefully this time. Happy building, and keep craft alive.